will give the ball to McClendon. He leaps. Oh! He doesn't get in. He fumbled the football. Carolina holds. The game is over. And Carolina has won the game.
With 5 seconds, he's going to throw it. Howard leaps. He has it. Touchdown. Carolina back from the dead to tie the game with 2 seconds to go. There is a flag down. But holy smokes.
2 and 4 in overtime games. Carolina 1 and 3. Here from under center. Give off to Greg Little. Little pulls away. Little is going to score. Carolina wins.
Snap back, spot down. The kick is cleanly away. It is good.
And it's
with
yes,
a 54-yard field goal. And how about them Tar Heels? They do it.
Possible win. Snap, spot, kick away, high enough, long enough. It's good! It's good! Carolina has won the game on a 42-yard field goal by freshman Hunter Burns.
In his end zone. The punt, very high. Switzer will have room to return it. He fields it at the 40. Coming near side, Switzer at the 50. Switzer, 45, cuts back at the 40. 35, breaks a tackle at the 30. Still on his feet. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Ryan Switzer for 6. He is doing his best Giovanni Bernard impression. Ryan Switzer again. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? It's the Heel Tub Blog Podcast here on a Monday night with you and recapping one of the another tough loss for the Tar Heels and one that drops Carolina to 8 and 3 on the season, and now has Carolina sitting in a spot where they got to win next week against NC State, or else we're pretty much right back where we were at the end of last season. Plenty to get to here on this edition of the podcast. We got to talk about the fumbles. We got, their impact on this game was absolutely huge, and you hate that it happened to the player that it did. We'll talk more about that. Drake May struggles again against the Clemson Tigers. Big part of that due to the unit in front of him. So we'll talk, of course, about that. And another tough defensive performance, especially on the ground for the Tar Heels, as they just did not have any answers for this Clemson running game. So we'll talk all about that. Mac Brown had an interesting comment, and there was an aspect of this game that drew the ire of a lot of fans. We'll talk about that as well. And also, before we get out of here, Carolina, no injury updates today in their press conference. What does that mean? What are we thinking that could possibly mean for a guy like Elijah Huzzy, who exited the game early and did not return? So we're going to talk about all of that here on this edition of the podcast. But we have to start just by talking about what I think is really just the most disappointing game of the season for Carolina. I mean, I think the other ones, disappointing wasn't really what we felt. I feel like that was more anger. And a lot of people are probably saying, hey, dumbass, you were the one that said coming into this game that Carolina was going to lose this game. And I actually predicted the margin correctly, 38-27, the final score 31-20. But I got to be honest, I did not see this game going the way that it did. Do not let the final score fool you. Carolina had a chance to not only win this game, they had a chance to probably control this game. And I truly believe there were a lot of people that were mad at me this morning, that on the Mac and Bone show that said, When I said that Clemson really didn't play that great of a game, that I didn't know what I was watching, that when I said that Carolina had a chance to come out and punch them in the mouth, that I didn't know what I was talking about. If Carolina scores the two drives early in the game, the first drive and the fourth offensive drives of the game where they fumbled on, Carolina probably wins that game. I'm not going to say going away, but they probably would have had a pretty comfortable lead the majority of the way, because this Clemson team that had so many issues with turnovers would have had to throw the ball a lot more than they did. Carolina had a chance to put this team on their heels, and they didn't, because this is Carolina football. There's just no other way around it. There is no other way to explain how one of the most trustworthy backs in the entire country has a tremendous game outside of the two fumbles, but has the two biggest plays of the day that go against Carolina and ultimately are the reason that Carolina loses this game. So, I don't know about you. Virginia, Georgia Tech, I really was just angry and pissed off after those games. But this game, it's really just more disappointment, because I think we expected that we were going to lose going in. But when we saw that there was a chance for Carolina to win, I think we all thought that they had a chance to execute on it, and they didn't.
Disappointed is a good word. I think frustrated is also another word, because it's example, how many ever 0.0 that this program just can't get over the hump.
475.0.
And even though this isn't a vintage Clemson team, they're not going to play for a championship or anything. For this program, this is a measuring stick. And in a lot of ways, you measured up, because you went on the road in the most difficult environment you played in this year, and you competed. You didn't get blown out, which was very much on the table, I thought, going into the game. And then with the fumbles, it was on the table for you to get blown out. You didn't get blown out. Arguably the best running back in the country who hadn't fumbled the ball all year has two costly fumbles that ended up playing a pivotal role in the game. Your offensive line, which for the first quarter and a half or so held its own, just forgot how to block for your generational talent at quarterback from the middle of the second quarter on the rest of the way. And then a defense that we believed so much in the first month of the season. We knew what the game plan was going to be going in. And yet, we have time and time again, we had no answers for the running game. So it's just, it's really just frustrating. And I think it's just why I think I said this last week on the pod. I'm getting to a place with this team where I'm not going to allow them to continue to hurt me. I'm going to watch them, and I'm going to enjoy when they play well and be upset when they lose. But my Saturdays are no longer hell-bent on what that team does, because, I'll be more frustrated and unhappy more often than not. And so they competed. They played hard, which was more than what you could have said against this team a year ago. But there's still a gap that's between Carolina and Clemson. And it's probably just another sign that, whenever this season does come to an end, Mac Brown goes into retirement, because I feel like he's done all that he can do, and yet we're still 11 points away from being the type of team that can compete with the perennial power week in, week out.
Well, it's the same story over and over again. It doesn't matter who the opponents are. It's just the fact of the matter is that you should watch this team up until about middle of October and then just stop watching them. Because if you did that, you would love watching this team, because this is what they do every year. I said it today. At some point, can we just not start fast? Can we just suck out of the gate? Just absolutely suck like we do at the end of the year to begin a season, and then turn it around and play the way that we do early in seasons at the end of a year. This is the part that I think is most frustrating with this program right now, is that every single year now, you start the year out so well where you feel like, okay, we're building something. We have a chance to compete. And by the end of the year, you look back and laugh at yourself and say, man, how stupid did I seem at that point of the season? This year, I mean, we said it so many times on here that we truly believe that this team was different. And again, I don't know if you're pointing to this game against Clemson as the game where you say, okay, this proves that this team isn't different. But it really is just another example of a team that, as you said, just cannot go from good to great. I mean, I got to be honest. Are they even good? I mean, what are they, slightly above average? Like, I feel like that's the point that they're at right now, because games that they have opportunities to win, that they set themselves up with the opportunities to win, they can't do it. They physically cannot do it. And I mentioned the fumbles were a big part of it. And look, I think, the first one was frustrating enough. Now, you can make an argument that this goes on the offensive line. False start on the offensive line, backs Carolina up from the 2-yard line to the 7. Hampton then fumbles the football. But, look, your running back's got to be able to hold on to the ball there. Okay, that's bad enough. The second fumble, that was the one that completely changed the game. Hampton going into the end zone, ball gets punched out from behind by Nate Wiggins. Clemson, it goes out of the end zone. Clemson gets the ball at the 20-yard line. They drive down the field, tie the game. That was pretty much where the game changed, because Carolina's offense could not do anything from that point forward, consistently moving forward. I mean, it just can't happen. And I hate it, man. I hate that we have to sit here and talk about Omarion Hampton being one of, if not, in my opinion, the biggest reason that Carolina lost this game. Because, look, if he holds on to the ball, even if Carolina kicks a field goal on the first drive, and he holds on to the ball and goes into the end zone there on the fourth drive of the game, Carolina's up 17-0. That's a 3-score lead on the road at Clemson. I can't remember the last time somebody had a 3-score lead on the road at Clemson. You probably got to go all the way back to that 2014 game that Florida State played there and just beat the brakes off of them at night. I mean, you would have taken that crowd out of it. It would have been, really hard for that team to recover after everything that they had been through. I mean, look, is it possible they could have recovered? Oh, of course. Dabo Swinney is as good as any coach in the country at rallying his guys, as he's shown this year. But I mean, to me, like, if he holds on to that football there, even in one of those occurrences, and they score a touchdown, 2 scores, huge difference in the game. So he may have been great. He may have ran for 178 yards on the night, but he's the biggest reason Carolina lost this game in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it's up there, because if those turn into, even let's just say it's a touchdown and a field goal. Let's say that you don't even convert the first fumble, Carolina stalls you, and you take 3 points. It still changes the game, because you're at some point, playing with the lead, maybe a double-digit lead. Clemson's got to change the things that they got to do offensively, and maybe you're able to apply more pressure on Klubnik. He forces a turnover, all that. That didn't happen. There was never once in the game you made Clemson play uncomfortable. And for you to go on the road into that environment, you're going to have to make them become uncomfortable. Because as long as they were going to stick to their schedule and play the way they wanted to play, what played out was the game plan. Was they knew they could wear you down quarter by quarter, and by the middle of the second half, you'd be gassed. And it sucks because Hampton's had a fantastic season. You could argue he's had the best running back season of any running back in the country. And there's a lot of great running backs that are playing this year and playing at a high level. And the fact that he had some 200 some odd carries without a fumble this year, and he fumbles not once but twice, is just maddening. Because you look at the stats and you go, man, that guy had a great game. Like, how many other running backs are putting up that type of production against Clemson's defense? There aren't many. But he also had 2 fumbles. And, when you look at, from going to good to great and what those margins look like, you can't turn the ball over on the road. You can't turn the ball over inside the 5 twice on the road. And that's what happened. And that, as much as anything, is as big a reason why Carolina came up short once again.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely, partly on him. But again, if it's a double-edged sword, because if he doesn't play the way that he plays, Carolina has really no chance to win this game, because Drake May, for a second straight year against Clemson, was not great at all. This game, you could argue he was better in this game than he was last year in the ACC championship game. Not really saying much, but still, the thing for him, really a tale of two different players, I guess is what you would say, because it wasn't even really 2 different halves. It starts the game 5-9, 120 yards, touchdown on the first 3 drives. So not too bad, not the most accurate, but still getting the ball down the field, hitting some big plays. Hits the touchdown pass to J.J. Jones, which was a special one, to say the least. And it looked like, okay, he's going to be under some pressure, but he's still going to have a chance to succeed. After that, he completed just 11 of 27 passes for 89 yards and threw the interception at the end of the game. Now, he did run the ball pretty well, 10 rushes for 67 yards, did a great job scrambling all night. But really, I mean, this is, 2 straight performances against Clemson where he's just looked off. I mean, short hopping some stuff, even on those first couple of drives, the incompletions were not even really close to receivers. It's just, a guy that seems, when they get into this game, especially when he's under a lot of pressure, he just can't really do a whole lot with the football. And again, part of it is that Clemson secondary played really well. There wasn't a lot of separation from the Tar Heel receivers. They showed, multiple times on the broadcast, guys just not being able to create any separation at all. But I mean, this is one of those things that, if Carolina is going to be able to beat really good teams, they have to do enough to help their quarterback out. And, I mean, I guess part of this has to be on Drake's shoulders too. He has to play better in games against teams like Clemson and the team they're going to face next week that's going to have a really good defensive front that's going to try to get after them in NC State.
Yeah, I mean, I might be speaking out of hyperbole. If he doesn't end up being the number 1 pick in the draft, this tape and the tape last year could really be the biggest reason why, because those are the 2 best defenses that he's played, and he had his 2 worst games. Part of it is Clemson's defense, while they've been quote-unquote down as a program, the defense hasn't been. That defense has been ACC championship good, really national championship good the last couple of years. And you saw that the other day with the way that they out physicaled Carolina at the point of attack. They kept him in a muddy pocket. They knew how to contain him to where they were forcing him back into pressure. And then their corners, their ability to play physical down the field really played a factor. On the flip side, this is where I thought Chip Lindsey really failed his quarterback, was because a quick passing game that Carolina used early and often in the beginning of the year just wasn't really effective. We didn't even really try to get the ball just out of his hands quickly and make these guys make plays in open space. And so I thought it was just a collaborative effort all around up front about Carolina not putting the type of performance together that they needed to put together. You turn the ball over twice, inside the 5-yard line. And then you really struggle to protect. You really struggle to create separation in the passing game. Chip Lindsey's game plan since the Miami game have been questionable. He was going to have to be dang near perfect on Saturday to give Carolina a chance. And as we learned over the course of that game, he was anything but.
Yeah, I mean, and the biggest thing for me is that, the offensive line just has to be better. That's really where it all starts with Carolina against these good defensive fronts. They've just had nothing for these groups. And, you were hoping that maybe last week good performance against Duke, who has a really good defensive front. Maybe that would help this group out. No, didn't do anything for them in this one. Now, look, this group for Clemson is, I mean, one of the best, if not the best defensive lines in the entire country. I mean, you talk about just the amount of depth. I mean, the guys that they were rotating in, I mean, you've got true freshmen that are already, I mean, if they were at any other school, they would be starting and playing just about every snap. But here on this defensive line, they're rotating in with guys that are first-team All-ACC, potential All-American type players. So, I mean, it was definitely, a test for Carolina. You can tell that their offensive line is getting worn down as the season goes along, very similar to last year. But, I mean, look, this unit allows 4 sacks the other night, 15 total pressures, which isn't nearly as bad as a year ago. I mean, a year ago, Carolina allowed 28 total pressures to Clemson in the ACC championship game. But the biggest thing for this group that really hurt the team the other night was that they committed 6 penalties.
Yeah.
3 of them alone called on Spencer Rolland, 2 on Corey Gaynor. It's just, these guys are veterans. This cannot happen. Spencer Rolland, 3 quarterback pressures allowed. Corey Gaynor, a sack and a quarterback pressure allowed. And Willie Lampkin, 3 quarterback pressures allowed as well. So just all around, I mean, you had 3 guys right there that had arguably their worst performances on the offensive line of the season. And look, it doesn't get any easier for this group. NC State's defensive line is, I'm not going to say just as good as Clemson's, but they're pretty damn close. So this group needs to bounce back. And I know they've been solid throughout the year, but that was the thing. We knew these were going to be the tough test at the end of the season. And the first test, Carolina failed pretty badly.
Yeah, solid's not good enough when you're going on the road against that team and that environment with that front. You have to be great. And the fact that 5 of your 6 offensive line penalties were committed by veterans is really the most disheartening thing. Had it been a Diego Pounds out there or someone like that, like their first real big moment on the road, okay, you live with that because he's a younger player, hasn't been in that situation. I mean, Corey Gaynor's been playing college football for 6 years. Spencer Rolland, 5 years. They've been around the block. They've seen enough. And so it was frustrating because it's really hard to say take away the holes they created on the big runs. But outside of the big runs that Hampton experienced, they just didn't do nothing up front enough for you. It felt like you look at the touchdown pass that Drake threw. He had to make a great throw. It wasn't that the offensive line gave him time. And so that's the disappointing thing, right? Is that you committed 6 penalties, and outside of 2 to 3 plays, you virtually got beat, it felt like, on every play. And that was the measuring stick last year. We measured ourselves again this year. The pressures, you cut in half, but 15 is still too many to go on the road. And so whether Mac Brown's back next year coaching this team or we got a new head football coach, that's the area as much as any area on this team that you've still got to continue to address and figure out a way to get to that next level if you really want to compete with the best this conference has to offer.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's both sides of the trenches. And I'll say this, I would give the offensive line more of a pass because you've had 3 offensive line coaches in 3 years. Mm-hmm. The defensive line has been the same guy the entire time since Mac Brown has come back. So, I mean, I get it where things can get lost in translation, but these are the games where you got to step up. And you're right. To me, the pressure numbers don't even really tell the story. I think more than anything, just about every single rep, they were dominated off the line of scrimmage. Guys were just getting pushed back right into Drake's lap, and there really just wasn't anything that he could do about it. And that's part of the problem. You can't have that happen to your quarterback every time that he's dropping back. He's got to have a clean pocket, especially when routes down the field are just not there to begin with. So, I mean, I'm hoping that they can bounce back, but it's hard to feel super confident that it's going to happen with this group because, yeah, I mean, they're at the point this year where they're starting to get worn down. And, I mean, you brought up a great point as well with the running game. I mean, I think a lot of people will get misled by the amount of yards that Amari and Hampton had. Guys, it really came on 2 plays. The long run that was fumbled and then the long touchdown run. That was the majority of his rushing yards. So they didn't even run block that well. Yeah. So, I mean, you need this group to bounce back. Hopefully, this being a rivalry game, there'll be some extra motivation. And hopefully this is a group that learned from last year. But I got to tell you, saying that at this point means nothing because we said that about this entire team. After what happened last year, would they learn from that experience when they were faced with adversity here at the end of the year? And they haven't done it. It's the same It's the same story, just a different season. Speaking of that, look at the run defense. No answers for Clemson's rushing attack for the majority of the night. I actually thought, for the most part, they did a solid job against Phil Maffa. I mean, he carried the ball 23 times at 84 yards. It was just 3.7 yards per carry, which is all right, not great. So in that area, I thought they did well. The problem was apparently they forgot that Clemson has 2 running backs and that you also have to stop Will Shipley because he was phenomenal in this game. 18 carries, 126 yards, also had 2 catches for 53 yards through the air. Carolina could not stop him at all the entire night. He seemed like a man on a mission. And what would you expect when, a lot of people at Clemson pretty much wanted him to be the number 2 back, let Phil Maffa take the majority of the carries? I feel like they're probably going to want to revisit that conversation here. But the thing is that Carolina, when defensive line's getting blown off the ball like it did, the interior of the defensive line did nothing the entire night. The edges getting worn down because both guys on the edge, both your starters played over 70 snaps. Kamen Rucker, for crying out loud, played 91 in this game as a freaking edge rusher. I mean, there was absolutely nothing Carolina could do, especially once you got into that third and fourth quarter. And Clemson did what every team has been able to do on Carolina late in games, which is run the football all over them with the hot running back, which was Will Shipley in this one.
Yeah, I mean, they mentioned it in the broadcast, how Maffa and Shipley compete with one another. They push one another, kind of the same stuff we heard when we had Javonte Williams and Michael Carter in our backfield. And you saw that on display the other night because Shipley was fantastic. And even though Maffa's, he had 23 carries, 84 yards, you held him in check, but the physicality was the thing. They were finishing runs all night long from the word go. Like Carolina would hit them, and then they would take them for a ride 1, 2, 3 yards. And over the course of a game, that stuff adds up. And as difficult as Clemson's offense was going to be, you had a 4-game set of tape where offenses that are less gifted, less talented than what Clemson has to offer move the ball up and down the field on you. I mean, we saw what this Virginia offense did. Georgia Tech is a very explosive offense. We saw what they did. And it's why I said coming out of Campbell, I wasn't putting any stock into that because the first quarter and a half of Campbell, they pushed Carolina up front around 2. And so that's going to be the thing that if Mac Brown is indeed back for next year, dude, enough is enough. You've gone through 3 offensive line coaches. Some of them basically, weren't even by your choice because they left for other gigs. This one has to be by choice. I understand that Tim Cross is a very big part of what you do recruiting-wise. I understand that he brings a leadership value that is needed in that locker room. But he's not getting the job done on Saturdays. And that's the most important part of his job. And at some point, you got to be willing to cut ties. You were willing to cut ties with Dre Bly, a former great, one of the most beloved players in the history of that university that played for you. You were able to have that tough conversation. We got to have the tough conversation with Tim Cross because this isn't from a lack of talent. They've gotten enough dudes up front for this to not happen week after week, year after year. You're not developing the talent. You're not developing the depth on the roster. And that's the biggest reason why, when this is all said and done, and you look at this 5-year stretch of Carolina football with Sam Howell to Drake May, and you've got a rather empty trophy case, it's because you ain't got no dudes up front defensively, and that showed up once again on Saturday.
Well, I mean, I got to be honest. The depth thing on the defensive front is not even a conversation. Like there is depth. It's just as simple as play the guys. Now the interior of the group, it's just that guys are not good enough. Like and that's on the coaching staff because they're not developing these guys. That's on the strength and conditioning staff, which I've said for the better part of the last 2 years. It's time for a new strength and conditioning staff. When you're getting pushed around like this over and over again, at some point, you're not doing the work in January and February that you need to be doing in order to win at this time of the year. That defensive line, I mean, they've got enough guys. That's the one group they actually rotate guys, or they did early in the year. The edge rushers, they've just completely abandoned it, and it makes no sense. It's just, I mean, again, that's on Tim Cross. I don't really understand what his thinking is at all. But he should wake up and realize that Kamen Rucker's a phenomenal player. He's had an unbelievable year. The fact that you think that he should be playing every single snap, I mean, dude, do you just not understand? Like this dude is beat. Like he is worn down. And the more times that you just keep playing him over and over again, the more worn down he seems to get. I mean, how many games in a row have we seen him go down at some point and had to be tended to by trainers on the field? Like, you need to just realize, dude, you can't be playing him that much. Des Evans has had a pretty solid year. He's playing 70-something snaps in a game. We can't get Bo Atkinson a little more run. Like, balance these guys out. And then on the interior, you're rotating guys, but it doesn't matter. The combinations just don't seem to be working right. I mean, at some point, that unit just has to step up and, put on their jocks and play. Like, it has to happen next weekend. Like, that has to be a game that you come out and dominate up front. And whether or not that means that you just destroy a team in the trenches, or if that means that you just hold your own. That was the biggest thing in this game. All you had to do was hold your own. This Clemson offensive line that you face is the worst offensive line that they have had probably since Dabo has been there, maybe since his first year. It's been a long time. I don't remember that offensive line. This offensive line unit for Clemson was horrible, and in their standards, and they still absolutely manhandled you. There's no excuse. It just we've got to stop making the excuses for this group. With that being said, this is probably going to seem like an excuse, but I think it's at this point, it's really just about it's an observation at this point that is hard to ignore. And it's that this defense is just getting as fatigued as any defense that we've seen in recent years for Carolina. Again, in this game, Clemson dominates the time of possession. Over 35 minutes of possession in this game for Clemson alone. They ran 92 offensive plays. Cedric Gray, Power Echols, Kamen Rucker, and Marcus Allen all on the field for over 90 snaps. Two more guys, Stick Lane and Des Evans, on the field for over 70 snaps. I mean, look, Carolina's got to do a better job. And in this game, it was because they simply were not able to stay on the field outside of those first 4 drives. Carolina's got to do a better job of trying to slow the game down a little bit and help this defense out, because right now they're playing entirely too many possessions. I thought early in the season, Carolina did a good job of sort of balancing things out, limiting the amount of reps that the defense was forced to play. And I think another big part of it was that, this defense wasn't worn down. But at this point, I mean, you've got so many guys playing so many reps. You need to start rotating more, but that simply isn't going to happen. And at this point, it just means that Carolina's defense is too tired to really be able to play at the level that they did earlier in the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think you brought up a great point. The first month of the year, Carolina, I mean, played with tempo because no team huddles anymore, but it was more of a methodical approach. Hey, we're gonna work the clock and keep our defense fresh because we got to help them out. And what happened? The first month and a half, Carolina was giving up like 22-ish points per game, getting after the quarterback, weren't getting run down in the fourth quarter. And then something happened in that Miami game where it felt like for the first time they didn't trust the defense. And which didn't make a whole lot of sense because Carolina controlled that game from like the second quarter on, it felt like. But that game felt Phil Longo-esque, and it seems like Chip Lindsey hasn't gotten out of that mode ever since. You go back to the Georgia Tech game. I mean, it felt like from the moment Georgia Tech punched back in the second quarter, he was chasing points, and it felt like he was calling to score a touchdown on every play. And like in theory, like, yes, the goal is to score touchdowns, but sometimes you can score touchdowns that don't benefit your defense. And that's kind of been the curse of this program for the last decade or so. And 92 plays, first off, is, yeah, you got to get off the field on third down. But, I mean, when you're shot by by halftime, Carolina just felt exhausted. They look exhausted. They felt exhausted. And when that happens, you don't got a whole lot of resistance left. And, I know Mac Brown said today that, they got to do a much better job rotating and all that type of stuff. I just don't get, like,
just stop. Just stop. I mean, Gene Chizik said this too. Just cut the crap. Cut the crap. Quit telling us this, because you've told us this every year that you've been here, and it's the same thing. And I got to be honest, I've seen some of the guys that have come in, especially, at linebacker. Like, dude, Amari Campbell can handle being in there for a little bit to give Cedric Gray and Power Echols some time to breathe. Because, I mean, I don't know if you, like, to me, both of those guys, the last few weeks, they played some of their worst games of their career because they're dead. They have nothing left. Like, I mean, look at how many times they've missed tackles in the last few weeks. They're not the same players because, I mean, at this point, I mean, you're playing all of those guys. I mean, I put it in the preview the other night, and I'm trying to find it right here. They have now played, so counting Saturday night, that means that Cedric Gray and Power Echols have both played more than 75 snaps in 5 of the last 6 games. That also means Kamen Ruckers probably played about that same amount in that stretch. Marcus Allen, before he gets hurt, Elijah Huzzy. Like, you're talking about these guys playing every single rep. There's no depth. There's no rotation. And look, I get that there's some drop off, but at some point, like, yeah, you want to be good early in the season. You want to stack up those wins. But this is the same thing that happened to you last year. Your defense wasn't good from really the word go last year. But the other part of it was that your guys simply got worn down. I think on the defensive line at times they've done a better job of rotating. I think at safety they've done a better job of rotating. But outside of that, I think they have done a horrible job of rotating. And I'm sorry. I'm tired of hearing you say we're going to rotate. It's the same thing of pretty much anything that comes out of Mac Brown's mouth at this point. Stop saying it and actually execute it, because until you actually do that, I don't really give a damn what you say in a press conference.
Well, the most frustrating thing is that, like, you've got like 87 people on staff that are wearing headsets and all this type of stuff. How is there that lack of communication to where, and you got all these dudes all, in the booth watching the and evaluating, and you're tracking all this type of stuff. You got all this data now to where you can track, you review this stuff, and it's not getting better. Like, why? If I was a donor, I would go to them and say, why am I giving you the money to invest in this technology? that you say you need to keep your players fresher, more healthier, blah, blah, blah. And then every year my dudes are worn down by November and we're getting run over by all these teams. And so that's to me what's frustrating. Now, and it's our job to use their words against them. It sucks because I don't want to come up here and call my coach a coward or, call him out. But you're right. We've heard the same message out of that room for years. And we'll go into this next game on Saturday, and I bet you we'll see a graphic in the fourth quarter of snaps played by Kamen Rucker, Ced Gray, Marcus Allen, and it's going to be some egregious number. And if Carolina loses, Mac Brown will get behind the podium and say, we didn't do a good enough job rotating guys. We got to get better at that. Well, you can only really say that so many times, man, before we're just going to quit believing it. And if fans don't believe you're going to rotate, you think the players believe you're going to do it? Do they know what's being said? Because I'm sure you're telling them we're going to do a better job this week getting you in the game. And then they don't get any grass stains on the shirt because they're not seeing the playing field. And so it's frustrating. It's maddening. And, it's just another sign that this program on the field and off the field, they've still got some room to grow.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. You've got guys. I mean, you've got coaches that should be pointing this stuff out to you. Like, if we can see it as fans and you can point it out in a press conference, then you should be able to do something about it. But when it comes to
point out during the game,
I mean, my thing is like, what are you listening to what the players are telling you when they tell you, Coach, I don't need to come out of the game? Yeah, of course they're going to say that. They're competitors. Like, at some point, you just got to look at them and say, look, ultimately, I need you to come out of the game here in this moment because I need you to be out there later in the game, and I need you to still have something left in the tank. I need you to still have something left in the tank when we get later on in the season. Like, it's too late now to go back and correct the stuff that's happened before, but I mean, look, you've got to find a way to keep these guys fresher moving forward. Now you've pretty much made your bed and you got to lie in it. You're probably going to play these guys as much as you possibly can in this game against NC State because you need it. But it's something that Mac Brown and this staff they have to learn this earlier in the year. You can't be sitting here after game 11 and saying, well, our guys are worn down and we probably could have done a better job of keeping them fresher. Yeah, you think so? Like, I mean, it doesn't take the brightest bulb on the tree to figure that one out there, Mac. Meanwhile, another comment that from him that I think should have drawn the eyes of many, and it probably drew the attention of many around college football, was his comments about this was after the game. On Saturday. This was in his post-game press conference, not the presser that he did earlier today. Talked about, he was specifically asked by Adam Smith of Inside Carolina about the second fumble from Amorian Hampton where Nate Wiggins punches the ball out. Smith was bringing up something that a lot of Tar Heel fans were wondering about on social media, whether or not Wiggins was out of bounds when he touched the ball. Mac Brown basically then said that the reviews didn't go their way all night, and that was part of the reason that they lost the game. Tar Heel fans basically just coming out and saying that was the main reason that they lost the game, including one major site writing an article that really just pointed to the referees as the main reason that Carolina lost the football game. Can't agree with that at all. I don't think the referees really had much of an effect at all on this game. There was one play to me that stuck out that I was pretty angry with because at this point, the holdings on Kamen Rucker that go uncalled, it's just part of it. They're not going to call it. It seems like if you get your hands around his neck, as long as you don't completely grab onto him and just throw him to the ground, they're never going to call it. Don't understand why, but it is what it is. There was a pass interference in the second quarter on Tez Walker that I think should have been called. The corner clearly was there early, didn't turn his head, anything like that. That was the one that was probably the most frustrating for me. Other than that, I don't really think there's any other plays that you could really be that mad about. I know a lot of people were pointing to Cade Klubnik his knee being down on the play where he stretches out for the touchdown right before halftime. Knee wasn't down. What you saw on that angle was the towel. Both of his legs were still up. You could debate whether or not the ball was actually in. That was a little bit closer than I think many people thought initially. But I think ultimately they stuck with the ruling on the field. That was probably the right call because you couldn't get a definitive angle. And in terms of the ball being punched out from behind, first of all, it looked like he got his left leg in right as he's making contact with the ball. It was a bang-bang play. So it wouldn't matter even if it was a rule. And as far as I know, from trying to dig deep and try to find some things on this, which I don't think the rule book officially has any ruling on this, just from the interpretations that I've seen from others online about situations similar to this in the past, there is no rule against that. You could be out of bounds, punch the ball out. It doesn't matter because it's a fumble. As long as the offensive player is still in bounds, it doesn't matter. You can force the fumble. So it looked like that was clean. I know a lot of people were angry about that. But I don't see any way that you can put this one on the officials. The simple fact of the matter is that Amari and Hampton just can't fumble it.
I mean, look, it's 2023, guys. How many times are we going to take the easy and the lazy way out and blame officiating? They're going to miss calls. You've got to be good enough and tough enough to overcome them. And the fact that Mac Brown is as comfortable as he is using that as reasons as to why they got beat is a big reason why when these things happen, they don't overcome them. Like at some point, it happens in every sport. It's why we've got replay. And even replay gets it wrong sometimes, but they're not perfect. They're human. They're gonna screw it up. But that doesn't mean that you got to let it impact the next play or the next 25 or 30 plays. You've got to be tough enough to overcome adversity. And that's what poor officiating is. It's adversity. That's all it is. And it's frustrating that it feels like whenever we don't get a call to go our way, we watch our head coach throw a temper tantrum on the sidelines, and then our team basically decompresses in some form or fashion, and then he gets behind a microphone and uses that as a reason as to why his team got beat. Not the fact that you gave up 247 rushing yards, not the fact that you fumbled twice inside the 5-yard line, not the fact that you couldn't sustain drives in the second half. And so to me, it's just something that, like, as someone that's got a platform to voice his opinion, I'm never going to use my platform to say officiating is the reason why my team got beat. Never, because I don't believe in it, and I wish more people felt the same way.
Well, I mean, look, there's certain cases where it could be egregious enough that you could say it played a big factor in it. Like, for example, game earlier in the year for the Giants, as a Giants fan that I watched, very clear holding in the end zone on the final play of regulation against Buffalo. That one, okay, you could have an argument where, okay, you're bringing that into play. You're clearly talking about that when you're recapping the game. I don't see why people were so mad about this. Like, I didn't see that. I know other people were bringing up the Cedric Gray thing. Look, you can argue the rule all you want on that one. I think it's a horrible rule. I don't really understand if you touch the helmet of a quarterback, why that's different. You could touch the helmet of every other player on the field, but the quarterback, you can't touch the helmet. But it is what it is. The rule is a rule. It was called earlier in the day in another game. I forget which game it was called in that I was watching earlier in the day. And yeah, I mean, they enforce it. They enforce it in the NFL. It's a soft rule. There's no doubt about it. It's something that should be taken out of the game, in my opinion. Like, look, I'm that guy, and I know there are a lot of people that hate it, and that targeting I think is a good rule. I think it should be in the NFL. Like, you saw a guy that just got suspended again, Kareem Jackson. That dude should never play football again. One of the dirtiest players I've ever seen in my life. And he should not be allowed to stay in games. Like, targeting, it's a good rule. If a guy, I mean, just you want to see an example of why targeting is in the game, go back and watch the highlight of the safety that was ejected for Boston College that literally threw himself into the air head first and just took a guy out. That's a good rule. This rule that they called the other night, horrible rule. Don't understand why they keep it in the game, but they do. Cedric Gray got his arm up. And I don't know if Mac Brown was just using that as a moment because he felt like at that time, remember that was the drive where they eventually score right before halftime. I don't know if he felt like the game was starting to slip away and he was trying to use something to sort of motivate this group. No idea. But it was interesting that he chose to freak out on that one because the thing is, he's talking about the reviews not going their way. You were, as far as we know, and look, maybe it was on the television broadcast. They did not show the sideline of Mac Brown freaking out. I feel like if he was losing it, they would have shown him. If you truly believed that the play should have been reviewed and they should have looked at the ball being touched by a guy that was out of bounds, then you should have absolutely lost it on the officials after that review. Like, you should have gotten to the point where you almost got ejected. We didn't see any sort of yelling from Mac Brown, anything at the time. So retroactively, you go back and watch it and say now I think that they should have looked at that. I'm telling you, I don't think that's a rule. So I don't think it would have mattered even if they looked at it. I don't think that's a rule in the rule book that you can't touch the ball and force a fumble. It's again, talk about things that are stupid. A guy standing out of bounds can touch the ball and punch it out of a guy's hand and it still counts as a fumble, but it is what it is. So, I mean, yeah, it makes you look like a weak program when your coach is using that as an excuse over and over again. When he points to that, when he points to all these other different things that he doesn't like at some point, man, you know, especially with that, like you can point that out in games that you win, not in games that you lose. And don't point to it as a reason that you lose. Well, now this sets Carolina up with a huge game against NC State this upcoming week. Mac Brown spoke to the media earlier today. No injury updates, though. This was the first time all year that Carolina has not had any sort of update on anyone on the roster. And I don't know what to make of this because I'm kind of concerned. Elijah Huzzy left the game the other night, did not return. He is a huge part of this defense for Carolina. They need him out there. So either this means that he is going to be good to go, and you know we shouldn't worry about this, or this means that he's probably done for the remainder of the season. Could be the remainder of his career. Just depends on what happens with the NFL. A Carolina career. That sounded a little bit dark there. Don't think it's anything career ending or anything of that nature. Just think he could be a guy that as a slot corner could get a look in the NFL. He is a junior, so definitely can't rule it out. But definitely something to keep an eye on here as we get closer to game day, which is on Saturday this year. First time in a long, long time that Carolina will not play State on Black Friday. The game is set for 8 p.m. on ACC Network. That was announced shortly after Carolina's loss on Saturday. So it is going to be a nighttime kick. West Durham and the crew will be on the call of that one as Carolina hopes to find a way to pull out a victory against NC State in a game that, as I said, they really need, because if not, Carolina loses 4 of their last 5 to FBS opponents. And this will be the second straight year that they have just completely collapsed down the stretch. It would leave us pretty much in the same spot a year later that we were last year, unless Carolina can find a way to win their bowl game. We'll have you covered on the website with all of it, HeelToughBlog.com. Guys, make sure you head over there, check out the Clemson recap that is up there, a little bit more in-depth on my takeaways from the game, some of the stuff that we didn't even get to here tonight that you guys can check out over there on the website. Also, make sure that you guys are keeping an eye out. It'll be up early this week. We'll have the stock report. Last week, I did write it. but I didn't share it because I'm an idiot. I forgot after the announcement from Cedric Gray. I was so worried about getting that one up there. That one, also an article that you should read. Cedric Gray heading to the Senior Bowl, basically confirming he will not be back for another season in Chapel Hill. Did have the extra year of eligibility, but is going to forego that to go on to the NFL. So congratulations to Ced. Should be a great opportunity for him to showcase himself at the most prestigious postseason bowl game for NFL draft prospects in early February. And then, of course, we'll have you covered on everything NC State leading into that game. Preview will be up. That will be up on Friday for you guys to check out there. Even though it is a holiday weekend, still going to be working and grinding on the football side of things and definitely on the basketball side of things. Carolina in action, Battle for Atlantis in the Bahamas. It starts on Wednesday. I'll be covering you with some of the recaps. I think I'll be doing just about every one of those, if not every one of those for Carolina out there, regardless of what happens. Josh will have you covered with most of the previews. I may have to dip in there on those as well. And then on the podcast side of things, it will be me solo most of the time. I may see if I can get someone in there to host with me so that we can have a little bit of back and forth on this Carolina team. But we'll see. It's crazy, a little bit of a crazy schedule going on here with Josh heading to Dallas for the holiday weekend. He's going to go watch his Cowboys play, but he's going to be keeping up with everything going on the Tar Heel basketball side of things. So he won't miss a beat. You guys won't miss a beat. And if you are looking for the Four Corners podcast, make sure you check it out wherever you get your podcast and subscribe to it, just like you should do if you are a listener to this podcast. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe for us, too. We'd greatly appreciate that. So that wraps it up for this edition of the podcast. Want to thank Josh for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.